Right. We are calling to order the special meeting of the Glendale City Council of September 19, 2023. Let's have a roll call, please.
Yes, council members Asatryan.
Here.
Divine.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Mayor Brotman and Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Here, may we have your report, please?
Yes, the agenda for the Tuesday, September 19, 2023 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on September 14, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. May we have the first item read into the record?
Yes, first item is community development regarding lease agreement for city-owned property 250 North Orange Street. A motion authorizing city manager to enter into a 2-year lease agreement with Armenian Arts, a DBA of Knowledge Truck Inc., a nonprofit California public benefit corporation, at a rate of $1 a square foot, totaling a monthly rent of $2,770 for certain city-owned commercial premises located at 250 North Orange Street, as subject to review and approval as to form by the city attorney.
All right, Mr. Galanian.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. The storefront location at 250 North Orange Street that the city owns as part of the Orange Street parking garage has been vacant for a number of years, and we have received a proposal from a nonprofit entity for that space that will present art exhibitions, acoustic performances, screenings, discussions, readings, workshops, and other gatherings, art-related gatherings. And the recommendation is for a 2-year lease in the amount of $2,770 a month. I'll turn it over to Bradley Calvert, our Director of Community Development, to add any other pertinent information, data, or if you have any questions of him.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. I believe the city manager covered that pretty well. The extent of it, it's a $2,770 lease per month. $1 per square foot. That space has been vacant for about 6 years now. We have unsuccessfully been able to recruit anyone to go into that space. We have been solicited to provide it at no charge, but we do see this as a good opportunity in this position to be able to kind of activate that corner. It's been underutilized for a while. We've used it for public engagement events, and that's really about the extent, a few art displays as well. 2 things to note in the report, that one that needs to be corrected and one addition that would go into the final lease. In the report, we note that they have 2 hours validated parking. That's actually 90 minutes based on how we do our parking in downtown now. The second is that the potential tenant is requesting to have 1 parking space within that parking garage at Orange Street free of charge for any staff member who may be working in that space. Those are the 2 changes different from what you see in front of you today.
Okay. Do my colleagues have any comments or questions?
Just a
Councilmember
comment so that those that are interested and are listening today, that Armenian Arts is this will be more than an art gallery. There will be social activities and publications designed, there are exhibitions, acoustic performances, screenings, discussions, readings, workshops, and other unique gatherings. So it is more than a museum or a gallery. So I think it's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Devine, for that clarification. I think it's important to note, yes. Any other comments?
So I'll move the item.
Okay, thank you. There's been a second, and again, I'll echo what Councilmember Devine said. I know that the individual applying under the Knowledge Truck and Armenian Arts name has done a number of exhibitions and other events, including concerts in the city and surrounding areas, and has a good track record. We look forward to seeing how they invigorate and energize that space for the downtown. With that, let's have a roll call, please.
Yes, council members Asatryan.
Yes.
Divine.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Mayor Brotman and Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Yes, thank you. May we have the next item read into the record?
Yes, the next item is City Clerk regarding presentation of the final draft of the 2022-2023 report on the status of women and girls in Glendale by Mount St. Mary's University. A motion to note and file the 2022-2023 report on the status of women and girls in Glendale.
All right, Madam Clerk, can we have your report, please, on this?
Yes. Last year, the Commission on the Status of Women approved a partnership with Mount St. Mary's University to produce a report on the status of women and girls in Glendale, and approved the establishment of an ad hoc committee to work on this report alongside city and MSMU staff. The final draft of the report, including a supplementary document addendum on Glendale's Armenian women, was approved by the CSW at the special meeting of the Commission on September 11th, 2023. The purpose of the report is to provide the city with data and analysis on issues that impact the lives of women and girls and highlight equity gaps. The results of the report can inform future city policies. The prior report on the status of women and girls in Glendale was published for the 2015-2016 years. Today, we have two people from Mount St. Mary's University. The first is Dr. Nicole Haggard, who's the interim director for the Center for the Advancement of Women at MSMU. And also we have Dr. Eleanor Siebert, who's the lead researcher and professor emeritus, and they are here today to make a presentation on the final draft of the report. We also have our commission chair, Diane Lamblot, here. And so I'd like to invite Dr. Nicole Haggard to come and make her presentation.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As she introduced me, I am Dr. Nicole Haggard, the director of the Center for the Advancement of Women at Mount St. Mary's University. We are the only women's university in Los Angeles. We're delighted to continue our partnership with the City of Glendale in drafting your 2022 to 2023 report on the status of women and girls in Glendale. The scope of the report was defined by the Glendale Commission on the status of women. They requested data on 5 areas: poverty, health, safety, leadership, employment, and earnings. Within the report, the most frequently cited data is the annual American Community Survey of the U.S. Census Bureau. At the time of publication, the U.S. Census Bureau had not yet published statistical data on Armenians. They publish ancestry data every 5 years. These data were released after the completion of your primary report. Given that Armenians comprise the dominant ethnic group in your city, you will note that we created 2 reports: a primary report that focuses on the women and girls of Glendale, and an addendum report that focuses specifically on Armenian women. Today, you will hear from our lead researcher and professor emeritus, Dr. Eleanor Siebert. She will offer a substantive summary of your report, and I would like to welcome her now.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be here. Nice to see you.
Welcome and thank you.
This report is a data-driven report, and the numbers are derived from official records, but also in large part from survey data. And this has a couple of implications to keep in mind as you read the report. The first is that anyone who participates in a survey answers to the best they can of their current knowledge and their current experiences. We have no way of verifying the truth or the accuracy of responses, so we take what they've got. And the other thing that you should keep in mind is that this is a statistical, the data are statistical. So what has happened with the Census Bureau is, and with all the surveys that we use, they have been directed to a sample of the population. And then the responses from that sample have been scaled up to represent the population as a whole. So there's some modeling that has to go on. And the Census Bureau has that pretty well in hand. But what it does mean is that there is an inherent uncertainty in the population statistics based on the sample size that was surveyed. And the smaller the sample, the greater the uncertainty when you scale it up to represent the population. So we have mitigated some of that sampling error by pooling data from multiple years. So you'll see that much of the data involves a 5-year summary, and that is, again, to make the data more statistically stable and to get at some information that you might not otherwise have access to. So the first slide I wanted to show demonstrates, I have three columns here. The middle column represents the 1-year count, single count of women in Glendale. And you'll see that there is no entry for the African American population because it is so small in Glendale. So we had to go to the 5-year summary report for 2016 to 2020, and there we had a large enough sample size to see that statistically the African American population of women was 2% of the overall. You can see that there are very slight differences in the other population percentages, but the 5-year is a snapshot of that 5-year period. 2021 is a snapshot of 21, so they're not exactly the same period. You have to give up something in terms of recency of data when you start pooling the data, but you do get stability. The final column is for LA County, and I included that in this slide to just really emphasize how unique the women's community of Glendale is in terms of the county in which Glendale resides. So the Latinas comprise about half of the women's population in the county, but only 1 in 5 in Glendale, about 20%. And white women in the county comprise about 1 in 4. We can flip that, and the white people, white women in Glendale comprise 61%. Of course, that 61% includes women of North African descent, Eastern Asian, Western Europe, and that includes Armenian women. So over the 5-year period, the most recent data for Armenian women is 2017 to 2021. There were a total of 103 women in Glendale, and those women represented 51% of the population. 62.6 thousand of those women were classified as white. That's 61% of all women that you see that in the table before. And of those white women, 37,700 are classified as Armenian. They identify as Armenian. So out of all women, out of all 103,000, 36% of the women in Glendale are Armenian, but of white women, they comprise 60%. You need to keep that in mind as you go through the main report, because every statistic that's there for white women is heavily influenced by Armenian women. Median age, well, women in Glendale, just like women in the county, the state, and the nation, tend to be older as a group than men. So in Glendale, the median age of the women is 41 years compared to 38 for men. If we look at women specifically, we see that white women tend to be the oldest, and Latinas tend to be the youngest group of women. But that white women includes Armenian women, and Armenian women have a much older median age of 47 years. In terms of marital status, 48% of Glendale women are married. This again, 2017 to 2021, and that's women who are 15 years and over. And 1 in 3 have never been married. Just a slight contrast with the Armenian women community, 51% of whom are married, and 1 in 4 have never been married. Moving on to educational attainment. What we see is that Glendale women, 25 years and older, that's the column on the left, 43% have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's pretty high for the state. And 33% have a high school education or less. We can compare that to Armenian women on the right. We see that Armenian women, 1 in 3, about 32%, have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's slightly less than the 43% of women as a whole. And 43% have a high school diploma or less. I've put on there, though, the figures from 2011 to 2015, so you can see that there has been an increase in educational attainment. In 2017 to 21, 32% have the 4-year degree or higher, and in 2011 to 2015, 28% of Armenian women had a bachelor's degree or higher. That makes a difference in terms of earnings and the types of jobs you can get. And we'll go into the next slide. We see that for all Glendale women, and we've restricted this to women between the years of 20 and 64, 72% of those women are in the labor force, and that means that they are either employed or looking for a job. If we go back to considering all women as a whole, 66% are in fact employed. 7% are unemployed. They're looking for a job and they don't have it. For Armenian women, there's a smaller percentage that's in the labor force, 64%, compared to the 72% for women as a whole. 58% are employed, with an unemployment rate of 9%. I'll just finish out this in terms of earnings. For all women 16 years and older, all workers, women who have any earnings at all, whether they're working part-time or full-time, their median earnings over this time period were $39,000. That's compared to Armenian women who had a median earnings of $34,000. For full-time workers, for all women, the median earnings was $60,000, and for full-time workers who were Armenian women, $53,000. The point, I think, here is that these are economic indicators, and they suggest that Armenian women are at a disadvantage when it comes to women as a whole. That is to say, there's a smaller percentage of them employed, there's a greater unemployment rate, and there are lower median earnings. Leads us into poverty rates. The poverty rates for 2017-2021 are there. You can see that Latinas have the highest poverty rate, followed by Armenians. That, remember, the Armenian number, 23%, is a subset of the white population, which has a poverty rate of 17%. What you don't see on this slide is that the number in 2010 to 2014 for all women and girls was 15%, which is the same as it is in 2017 to 2021. So that's a remarkably stubborn number. On the other hand, the poverty rate of African American women in Glendale has decreased from 13% in 2010-14 to 11%. Asian American women have a poverty rate of 9% earlier. That's decreased to 5%. White women as a whole have gone from 18% to 17%. The Armenian subset of women, their poverty rate has remained at 23%, again, a stubborn number. But the real shock, to me, at least when I was looking at these data, is that the poverty rate of the Latina population has increased 10 percentage points from 16% in 2010 to 2014 to 22% 26%. One other note I wanted to make about the Armenian population, while women of all ages have a poverty rate of 23%, for women over the age of 65, 32% live in poverty. We use as poverty the federal poverty level, and that's a pretty low number, lower than $30,000 a year. We looked at family units because poverty in families is always a problem with children. First, though, take a look at households. Glendale, over this time period, and now we are in 2021, Glendale has 70,800 occupied units, of which about 2/3 are occupied by families and 1/3 is occupied by non-family groups, groups of people who aren't related in any way. It could be roommates, for example. Out of that total number of households, nearly 71,000, 20,000 are headed by women. Some of them are heading families, and some of them are just heading non-family households. Now, jumping to the Armenian specifics, there are 25,000 households in Glendale where the householder identified as Armenian. And the number of households headed by women that, who identified as Armenian is about 7,500. So whether it's for the women's community as a whole or for the Armenian community, women head about 29 to 30% of all households. So that takes us to poverty now. We're going to focus on the family households and poverty. And there are different types of families I'm sure you recognize. There are families which are headed by partnered couples. There are families which are headed by single women with no spouse present, and those headed by single men with no spouse present. So for all family households across Glendale, 9% were living in poverty. If we bring out the Armenian population on its own, 15% of all Armenian families are living in poverty. For partnered couple households, for all families, it's 8%, but for Armenian families, 16%. For single woman households, regardless of the ancestry or the identity of the woman, it's 15%. With children, that poverty rate rises to 23%. For the Armenian community, single woman households, 16% of those live in poverty, and 28% if there are children present. We move to health data, and when we move to health data, the Census Bureau does not track health data. It's mostly demographic data. And so what we've done is we've looked to the LA County Department of Public Health and the California Health Interview Surveys for most of the information in that chapter. The Department of Public Health divides the county into service planning areas. Glendale is in Service Planning Area 2, called the San Fernando Valley, and Glendale comprises about 22% of the population of that particular service planning area. In 2019, the life expectancy of women and men in that service planning area was 83 years. That's pretty consistent with what had been found based on 2016 data for Glendale itself, where the life expectancy was 84 years. However, COVID did knock a couple of years off of Californians' lives and life expectancy. The issue is that we don't have any localized data yet on that. Leading causes of death for women and men were coronary heart disease, that's pretty common across the nation, and Alzheimer's disease. That was in 2019. Along came 2020 with the COVID pandemic, and COVID-19 became the second leading cause of death, displacing Alzheimer's to the third spot. The most prevalent chronic diseases of women, taken from the California Health Interview Survey in 2021, were obesity at 28% and asthma 16%. Another place where the COVID impact can be seen is in the mental health. And we looked at that for women by considering whether or not considering the probability of a serious psychological episode, one which required that they get medical help or that it impaired their functioning. In 2019, 11% of women in Service Planning Area 2 experienced this serious psychological episode, and in 2021, 18% did. Again, that's from survey interview, California Health Interview surveys. Finally, I wanted to talk about leadership. Business women are leaders in their own rights. And in 2021, there were in Glendale, residing in Glendale, nearly 1,900 women who were employed in their own incorporated businesses. There were more employed in unincorporated businesses as well. But sticking with incorporated businesses, that represented 40% of all those privately owned businesses. 60% were still owned by men. One thing I think that speaks to the resiliency, the creativity of women, and the progress they're making in the business world is that in 2014, 1,600 women were employed in their own incorporated businesses, and that represented only a third of all incorporated businesses at the time. Women have been volunteers, I think, in the forefront for nonprofit organizations. And in 2021, women made up also 60% of the paid staff in those agencies. And then we finally came to politics, and here we are. Out of the elected officials, you know better than I, 3 out of 7 are women. For the boards and commissions, this is where you have a really big hand because you make appointments to those boards and commissions. 42% of those positions are held by women. And the elected school boards, those for the Glendale Unified School District and the Glendale Community College District, 4 out of 5 are women. I forgot to turn on my clock, so I apologize for keeping you so
all right.
long.
No, you're
I'm
fine.
happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Any questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Asadrian?
First and foremost, thank you so much for this thorough report. And also thank you to the Commission on the Status of Women. I believe this is the first year we actually have some sort of data on Armenian women, which I think is imperative. And I know that our clerk, Susie Abajan, was in discussions about that and introduced that and the importance of that, I think, which will help us with programming. As I went through the report, if I may refer to some things that I think would be worthwhile to address as we're looking at programming and how we're going to dissect these numbers moving forward. On page 32, I know you note that 35% of Glendale residents report to have Armenian ancestry, and that's based off of census data and the modeling. I think it would be worthwhile to note that the 45% that you have for GUSD might be more accurate, because GUSD actually has an Armenian box when they do intake of students and families. That was a very hard fought battle some 15 years ago to incorporate that, with the understanding that the students would be better served if we actually had data on them. And so I do think that 35% probably is much higher for just Glendale residents in general. And looking at GUSD would be a helpful way to go about that. I think when it comes to poverty, and I think safety was one area that had me really concerned with the up in numbers of rapes and sexual violence against women, particularly in Glendale. And so I'm trying to understand as we kind of go through this report, and perhaps that's more of a question for the Commission on the Status of Women or the staff, but how are we using this report to help with policy making and programming within the city?
Let me just say a couple of words about that. I really believe it is in your hands because you know your charges, and you know long-term plans, and you know what your immediate priorities are. I don't know that. But I did make 3 observations which I see as challenges. And one of them is poverty. And it's the fact that the rate has been constant for a decade. And some of that is being held constant because of the increase in the Latina poverty rate, where others seem to be decreasing. But the Armenians are also constant. So I think that's one thing that either bears more research, or if you have some policies that are in place that ease the needs, the financial needs of women and families, then that might be something you could consider. Armenian women are less economically secure than women as a whole. I pointed that out in the earnings and employment graph. They have a smaller percentage of the population that's employed. I'm not sure if that's by choice or by culture. Whatever it is, it does mean that they're not at least independently secure. They have greater unemployment rates. There's nothing in the data that tells me why that would be. And they have a lower median earnings. But in the city, you do an audit of your employees, and I think that might be a good place to look. Anyway, those were the challenges, and then I couldn't let loose of this domestic violence and intimate partner violence, because it is a crime that has intergenerational consequences. It's very often, research has shown that the perpetrators of these domestic violence instances have been victims of domestic violence themselves in earlier years. And problem is, what we saw from the 2018 data, that's the latest I could find, is that for Glendale women, 18% had experienced physical violence in a domestic situation, and 9% had experienced unwanted sex. The calls to law enforcement agencies are vastly underrepresented. Nevertheless, the Glendale Police Department does collect those calls, and they have been up and down, but mostly around 300 calls a year. And it's also notable, I think, that of the 2022 unhoused population in Glendale, 9% talked about domestic violence as being a factor in their homelessness. So those were the challenges I saw, and believe me, there are a lot of numbers in this report. So there's a lot of information, and what may come out to be top priority for you folks is, again, dependent on what you have set as your agenda.
Thank you. I just have, yeah.
One other thing. It had to do with your 45% of Armenian children in the K-12 system in Glendale. I will say that the 35% is for across women of all ages, women and girls. And if you carve out a particular age group, you will not necessarily find the same distribution within that age group as you would across women as a whole. However, it's pretty darn close in the case of Glendale. And you might be onto something there. I don't know.
Mayor Pro Tem, I just have some comments, and do you want to take questions from other colleagues?
Let me
Yeah.
take some questions if my colleagues have them, and then I also do want to hear, we have 3 people on the line, so I'd like to hear from them before we close out with our comments. Any questions?
I have some questions. Thank you for this report. There really are a lot of numbers here. But you're not necessarily drawing conclusions or causations for any of these,
No.
right? I mean, I imagine, let's say you talk about the poverty rate, just for example. And the poverty rate for Glendale women has decreased from 17%, 14%. So that particular bit of information doesn't necessarily mean that those same women are represented. In other words,
Correct.
from that 17%, there could be a large group that have advanced out of poverty, only to be replaced by a new group of immigrants, let's
Right.
say, or they don't, I guess they don't have to be immigrants, but new residents
Right.
in that area.
Right.
Um,
There is one correlation. I don't recall whether I actually put the data in this report, and that is with educational attainment. The higher the level of educational attainment, the higher the median earnings, and also the lower the poverty rate. That data can be found if it's not in the report.
That's what our parents and grandparents always told us, is
Yes,
get your education.
me too.
and it'll be good. As far as health goes, you don't break that out between men and women. The life expectancy in 2016 was 83.7 years. Do you compare men to women in this study?
It's not available at the, in the service planning area 2 data.
Okay.
It is broken out in the California report, I believe. I believe we have some copies in case you're interested. So, and you'll find that the life expectancy for women is higher than that for men. Trying to remember, maybe 81 years compared to 79 after the pandemic for Californians.
Okay. I didn't realize it was that close. I thought there was a wider spread in that. Leadership. Women are doing pretty good with leadership in this region. 2 assembly people, 4 out of the 5 school board, city clerk, 2 council members, county supervisor from this district, and in fact, the entire board of supervisors is all women. So you don't give, if you were to give grades, that would be an A, wouldn't it, for women?
Well, women comprise 51% of Glendale's population, and if you look at it as a whole, you really are doing very well. I think at every level,
That's what I
there's
keep
room
telling
for
my
equity.
colleagues. I
Well,
say, you
but-
guys are doing darn good. Worry about the men in this city, because we're the ones who are sometimes on the downswing in terms of performance.
Well,
Didn't the report actually state that because it's 51 versus 42, we're underrepresented, just in Glendale? Because we can't
For-
count LA County, because that, not all parts are in Glendale.
Right. I'm just comparing those two numbers. And then if you go to the commissions and boards, just comparing those two numbers.
Okay.
And then if you want to talk about overrepresentation, that's the school boards.
Right.
But the idea, I think, is that on every deliberative body, a diverse set of viewpoints and experiences is very useful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Doctor, for the, and both doctors for the report. I know I was on the Commission on the Status of Women when we did the last report, and I think you worked on that. I think we spoke about that before the meeting. And this one is a lot more detailed, I have to say, a lot more numbers, a lot more data, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a good thing. I just was thinking, when I read about the poverty in the Armenian community and the households in poverty, and I'm thinking that just from the statistics that education and age are also relevant in those statistics, aren't they?
Well, education certainly is. And age would be too, because the older population, whether it's Armenian or any other group, tends to be less well educated than the younger women, have fewer job opportunities than younger women. So yes, age plays a role.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the other hand, with age comes experience, and that sometimes counts in income.
In some places, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you for the report, and I too was distressed when I read the numbers on the rape and domestic violence. But wasn't there one instance where men were more? There was a greater percentage of men that were victims of violence than women. Not rape, but just
Right.
violence.
I didn't give the men's figures here, but I will say that in the 2018 study, where 18% of women experienced physical violence, 11% of men reported it too. It's not a gender specific. It's just that women tend to be more impacted than men.
Yeah.
And for unwanted sex, it was practically all women, 9% versus 1% of men who
Yeah,
had experienced unwanted sex.
yeah, yeah.
But there are different categories of sexual crimes. Rape, in my mind, being one of the more serious ones, but there's harassment, it can be verbal harassment, there's stalking. And women, I think, tend to be less victims of stalking than men, but I don't have the figures on that.
Let's go to our callers.
We have 3 callers. Our first caller is Dr. Mashinka Fruntz. Dr. Fruntz, you're on air. You have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Mashinka Fruntz, and I am a professor at Art Central College of Design in Technology and Social Justice. And my work focuses precisely on the themes of how data enables us to do certain things that we can't do without it. And so I'm calling just to applaud the writing of this report and the publication of this report. I think it's doing absolutely crucial work for the women in our city. And with the attention to this data, we're going to be able to attend to their needs in ways that we absolutely would not be able to do in the absence of this work. So I just wanted to express my fulsome support for this and my gratitude to all of the people who worked on it. And I am very excited to imagine the ways in which this is going to enable the city of Glendale to better care for its FEM population. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is Anahid Yahajian. Anahid, you're on air. You have 3 minutes. Anahid Yahajian? Okay, we'll hold off on that. Our next caller is Catherine Yesayan. Catherine, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Catherine Yesayan. I've been a Glendale citizen for 45 years, and I'm a concerned citizen. I'd like to learn about all this going on in Glendale. I'm glad that I could hear your report, and I'm glad to see that the new report on the status of women in Glendale includes detailed information on issues impacting all women, including Armenians also. Armenian women have been invisible for too long. We need better census data on the Armenian population as a whole. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to the Commission for this timely and important report.
Thank you very much. I will try again. Anahid Yahajian. Anahid, you're on air. You have 3 minutes. Okay, I think
Thank
we're
you.
having a
All right, that's
tech
fine.
issue.
That's fine. I think if she happens to call back, maybe we'll
Okay.
be able to take her. But, I want to also take a moment to say thank you for this presentation. I thought the research and information is very helpful. I've mentioned before that I would like to have something similar to this and a presentation similar to this for the city as a whole. I think it's important for us, in the scope of the work of the Commission on the Status of Women to address the statistics and trends as they impact and affect women. But ideally, I would like to have as a council person, something like this that would act as a guiding North Star for our policies as a city as a whole, where we see, growth and shrinkage in certain areas demographically, socioeconomically, in terms of whether we have more families coming in or less, rates of poverty and education. I do want to ask in specific and I appreciate you addressing the statistics and information as it pertains to the Armenian women, because it is a very difficult group to help identify and find statistics on. In terms of college education, I noticed that they ranked lower than some other groups. And I don't know, how was college education recognized? Did a person had to self-declare their educational level on these documents? So, okay, and was it specific to education received in the United States, or was it education anywhere? Okay, so if they had received, because a lot of times folks who come over with degrees that may not transfer to the U.S. system of education may not announce. I know, for instance, that there's a lot of people that are not even using college degrees or even master's degrees that they have in other countries. But I want to make sure that we were able to capture that. That doesn't mean that they're not educated. It just unfortunately means our system may not accept whatever degree that they've earned in another country. And then in terms of how Armenians were pulled out of the overall statistics, and I understand that they were a subset of white, what was identified as white or designated as white, for lack of a better description, I suppose, as a catch-all. But in terms of the other group, what comprises the other again? Could you please clarify that again for me?
Please step up to the podium so it gets
I'm sorry,
recorded.
doctor, to make you come back up to the podium, but we won't be able to hear you unless you speak into the mic. And it's for the record.
So the other groups are, for example, Native Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders,
Okay.
Native Americans or Alaska Natives. There are multiracial groups, and I think those are the primary groups in the other category.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that we were not missing any other areas where Armenians can be hiding, because I know that sometimes some people may put down their place of birth. It may be Iran. It could be a former Soviet republic and may not necessarily mark down Armenian. I mean, I think these numbers are, I'm not the expert, you are, but they certainly look pretty accurate to me. And if there was a margin of error, what would you think that it would be in terms of these statistics?
The, which statistics specifically? The distribution of women?
Sure.
Well, let me start by saying that of the numbers I presented, the number which has the greatest uncertainty was the percentage of Armenian-headed households with children in poverty. Now, that was 28%. And the margin of error there is about 8 percentage points. So it can be as much as 20% or as much as 36%.
Okay.
And that gives you a range that you can be 90% sure, according to the Census Bureau, 90% sure that the real answer is in that range. And I did not say, but I think it's in the report, that the Census Bureau is very cognizant of these uncertainties in the numbers and does list in the tables that I've cited the margin of error. I don't mention them, I round the numbers because it's just too many numbers to put on a table.
And these numbers that were presented in this presentation, that you gave us in this presentation, were derived from a sample of the overall, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian, we have the caller online
Sure.
again.
Let's hear from 3 minutes.
We have Anahid Yahajian on air. Anahid, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I just want to reiterate my support for this report and the way in which it was executed. I shared my comments at the committee meeting previously, and I just wanted to share them with City Council. I grew up in Glendale, and I really think that a lot of the day-to-day would have been different if there was such attention to such detailed attention placed on the more specific demographics of the city, not just for Armenians, of which I'm one, but for all the different groups represented in the city. I think that the more we can look at things by zooming in and looking at different ethnic groups, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and accounting for people who identify outside the usual categories, and that includes the LGBT community. I think that it will only make our city stronger and make the programming that you all organize for us citizens more and more effective. So I just want to reiterate my support and thanks to everybody who pushed for this report to be taken to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And again, I think that this is something we need to have across the city, in all organizations, familiarize ourselves with these statistics as it pertains to women, as it pertains to different groups, ethnicities. And I would like to see us do a study session on this to better understand our community and dive deeper into this, find out, the differences in trends between, we use Asian as a catch-all phrase, but there's a lot of nuance there between our Filipino residents and our Korean residents and individuals from other Asian countries or Southeast Asian. So these are things that we need to really get a better understanding on. So thank you very much. And are there any other additional comments? Yes, Council Member Asatryan.
So I posed this in the beginning when I asked my other questions, but one of our priorities for this year has been to move forward with more data-driven programming and policies. I would like to recommend, if it's not part of the Commission on the Status of Women's Work, for them to actually meet with maybe some of the departments. I can see Community Services and Parks being one of them that oversees our unhoused programs and for domestic violence and so forth, being one of them. And then of course economic development as it pertains to women who own businesses in the city and how we can help there. I think it would be worthwhile for us not to just see, maybe see some policy recommendation changes of our structures. I do have to disagree with Councilmember Najarian. When you have 51% of the population and you have 43 or 42% on commissions and boards, we are not doing well. So I'd like to see, that we don't just not file this, but this becomes kind of part of the work of the Commission on the Status of Women with working with our other departments, and then bring these items as they come through that conversation you're going to be having with different departments. Mayor Pro Tem Sakian actually noted something important about the overarching city. I think it would be worthwhile taking this report as well as what we have for our city employees and combining that as well into the work that we need to do both internally and externally. So thank you again.
And I noticed that we do have our member of our Commission on Status of Women, Lamblot. Is there anything that you want to add to this or say?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Commission members. I'd just like to say that this was really a labor of love, and it really was a labor because the data is sort of vanilla to start with, and we really dug deep, especially to get the Armenian numbers and make it meaningful. And I'd like to thank Dr. Siebert again for not giving up on us, because we kept going back to her and saying, what about this, what about that? And we provided her with some information we were able to find, like the hospital survey that Adventist and Dignity did last year. And she, I must say, was all in and never once said, oh, are we done? So the report now looks very different than it did the initial draft run through. So, again, many thanks to her for her partnership with us on this.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I want to take this report further than just the city. I think it should be in the community. And I've asked this before, and I asked Dr. Abajian in the briefing. And Diane, I will ask you the same. Are you planning to take this out to the community, this information? You know, it's very important, I think, for Glendale Community College to learn about these, the education aspect of this report, the homelessness aspect to Essentia and other organizations in our community. Do you have plans for that?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, this is really a tool, a springboard from which we believe we can do good work. We can hold workshops, we can have, you suggested a town hall, you suggested presenting it to the city as a whole, that sort of thing. But also, there's so much data that we think, we can break it down. For instance, the educational section would be relevant to, obviously, the school board and GCC. I'd also like to point out that there is a several-page executive summary that we have talked about publishing separately. Because obviously, I think, and along with the report, but I think people that attend this are not going to want to read all 50 pages probably, like we have many times. So we think, and then the addendum, of course, is we think will be very useful. And we were really trying to make it relevant to the community. And we don't want to just leave it like, okay, we're done. We need to use it to make it useful.
Right, exactly. And the other suggestion that I had was to be sure that when you're doing this outreach, that you have a component on applying for commissions, how important our commissions are, that women can be on any of the commissions. They don't have to be necessarily on the Commission on the Status of Women. They can be on planning, they can be on DRB, civil service. We're trying very hard now with this new system to commit to diversity, and we'll see how that goes. But I know when I was on the commission, we did have a program we did at the Alex Theater, I believe, where we were promoting women and commissions and even elected office.
I think that's a terrific idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I hope that you will, as you say, use this as a tool. And I think you've done a brilliant job. I have to say, congratulations, Commissioner Lamelot, and to your fellow commissioners on the Status of Women, Dr. Bajian, thank you very much. The doctors from Marymount, thank you so much. Just a really a good tool for our community. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Right.
I also wanted to add that the executive summary for the report is translated into Korean, Tagalog, Armenian, and Spanish, so that would make it more accessible to the community as well.
So would this be alternative 1 or 2 based on the feedback that we gave?
I think the intent was to do note and file, and also provide, if you want to provide direction, council can do that as well. You can combine them in one motion if you'd like.
So can I move alternative 1 with the additional feedback?
You may.
Yeah, you may.
Okay, yeah, okay. So, all right.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. May we have roll call?
Council members Asadrian,
Yes.
Divine,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Brotman, and Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Yes, thank you. With that, we have no other items for this special city council meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
So moved?
May I have a second for adjournment?
I'll second.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your work. Wait a moment before we call to order our. Sure. Sure. What if the item was not on this specific agenda? There is a period where you can address the council, so it would be in the evening meeting. Right now, well, let me just explain procedurally, and I don't know if we're on air or not, doesn't matter, it's good for everyone to know this. If it's not something that was agendized for the council meeting that is listed, it would be during public comment, which is reserved for the evening portion. However, if you just allow us a moment for us to call and recess to closed session, I'm sure we can have staff or we can talk to you individually about the issue that you're here for. Thank you. All right, with that, let's call to order the city council meeting. May we have roll call, please?
Yes, council members Asadrian,
Here.
Divine,
Here.
Najarian, Mayor Brotman, and Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Here. Can you please read the closed session items into the record?
Yes. Closed session item A, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, claim of Aquino, claim number 23-0056B. B, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Edgarian versus City of Glendale et al., LASC case number 21STCV07056. C, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Baldassar versus City of Glendale, LASC case number 20STCV01045. D, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Salazar versus City of Glendale et al., LASC case number BC 700257.
All right, Mr. City Attorney, do we anticipate reporting out on any of these items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. On items 1B and C, we anticipate reporting out.
Okay, with that, we will recess to closed session. Thank you very much. Please turn off your mic.